Hi, I'm Abdul Abid, a board-certified APCP pathologist currently doing locums. Anytime I tell this to another pathologist, they'll look at me as if I'm from a different planet. I'm recording this presentation as a beginner's guide to pathology locums. The intended audience is anyone in pathology practice or even in training. I have no relevant financial disclosures. Starting off, what exactly is a locum? A locum is a person who temporarily fills the duties of another person. It is a Latin phrase meaning place holding. In the US, locums started in the 1970s in rural Utah, where the University of Utah and the Health System Research Institute provided education to medical students in rural settings, and then the graduates ended up working for these facilities. Over time, this experiment was repeated in other rural states. In 2001, the National Association of Locum Tenens Organization, or NALTO, was formed to establish ethical industry standards. How does locums work? This is an overview of the locums process in this slide from start to finish, and I will go through this step by step. So before I describe the process, this is a random email from a locums recruiter that describes what they are looking for in a potential candidate, and they are trying to ask some questions and depending on these answers, they will try to look up jobs that are available, and then they will get back to you. There are some terminologies in this slide that I will describe later on. The main difference between getting a permanent job and doing locums is that you have to go through locum agencies to apply for a locum job. And once you get the locum job, you are a contractor for an agency versus being an employee of a hospital or a group. There are close to 100 agencies that are registered with NALTO. Not all of them deal with pathology locums. By my current estimation, there are close to 25 or 30 that are actively involved in recruiting for pathology locums positions. Some agencies have a locum side and also a permanent job side. When you're looking for which agency to work with, it is generally better to work with a larger agency compared to a smaller one, because the larger agencies have dedicated teams for licensing, credentialing, insurance, managing travel, etc. When deciding between agents, the key is communication. Does the agent keep you in the loop during the whole process? Do they seek your permission before presenting your CV at a facility? Do they follow up with you after the presentation? And another good practice is to work only with locum agencies that are registered with NALTO, because there are also some agencies that are sort of like startups, and they do not abide by some of the standards set by NALTO. There's also the option to register yourself as a locum agency, but it is a little more cumbersome. It is doable, but a lot more work. Another point to note is that once you are with one agency and have worked through them at a certain hospital, then if something else opens there again, once you're done with that and you have moved on, and then the hospital again has a vacancy for a locums, you basically are stuck with the original agency that you work with. You can't switch agencies sort of like after the fact. So this is the inclusion criteria for doing locums. Generally, they prefer people who are either US citizens or who have green cards. For people needing visas, it's probably not a suitable option. APCP or any other board specialty is fine as long as you are eligible. Some places want medical license in hand when you apply. Some are willing to wait for the license while the credentialing takes place. And some agencies will work with you to get you a license for particular jobs. If you have to get a new state license to practice at a locum job, the agency pays for it. Agencies also take care of liability, medical liability insurance, your travel, your accommodation, and a rental car for you. You have to buy your own meals. Agencies don't provide healthcare, so either you carry your own insurance, or if you are married, and your spouse has insurance, you can use that. Some facilities only want to hire local physicians, those who are at a reasonable driving distance. And if you're not in the area, they're not gonna consider you. So in those cases, The agencies don't pay for flights and accommodations. There's a very specific subset there. I have talked to many recruiters who told me that until a couple of years ago, locums in pathology were few and far between. However, due to an overall shortage following COVID, many facilities have resorted to hiring locums to take care of work. I'm recording this video at the beginning of 2025, and things may change in later years. To find a locum job, you can just Google locum jobs in a particular state that you're looking for, or you could just Google locum pathology jobs and you will get a bunch of results. Another place to look for is through this website called locumtenants.com. Personally, I have found that the most reliable place is through the different locum agencies' own portals. Unfortunately, many of the agencies do not allow just anyone to basically search their portals, and you have to basically register with them to do that. Another thing to note is that sometimes there are dead links on Google and even on locumtenants.com, which means that a particular job was posted, let's say 6 months ago, and that job was taken by someone else, and there is no longer a need at that facility. But either the people who had posted that job, they forgot to remove it from the job board, or the job board just basically reposted it after 6 months or something. In those instances, you keep seeing that job pop up every few months, and if you try to look for that job or apply for the job, it's a dead end. So beware of that. I've been guilty of this myself. This was probably the most unique thing that I found when I started doing locums. I think on my first or second call with a locum recruiter, they asked me what my rate was, and I looked at them. I didn't look at them, but I heard them and I thought, I don't know what you're talking about. I found over the course of doing locums that for pathology, the lowest day rate, which I got when I started, was about $1,200 a day. And the high rate, which I've never gotten because I don't have as much experience, is probably around $2,000 a day. Some agencies asked about hourly rate, and if you could do that, if you basically do the math, the $1,200 is about $150 an hour, and $250 would be for $2,000 an hour, considering there would be 8 hours of work. Some agencies just pay more generally, like they pay more compared to the others. And if you have more experience, you can always ask for a higher rate. Every specialty has its own rates. Pathology has its own rates. Some specialties that are really highly needed, and for example, cardiologists and oncologists, they can actually make close to $4,000 a day at some places. And I just want to again emphasize that the day rate is usually for 8 hours of work only, and any additional hours of work that you do after the 8 hours, or if you're on call, you are reimbursed for that in addition to the day rate. And in terms of pay, some agencies pay weekly, some pay every 2 weeks. It depends. Another new thing that I learned about the locum marketplace, that it is quite fast. Jobs open and are taken rather quickly, especially if they are in desirable locations in or around metro areas. The average fill time for locum jobs is about 10 to 12 days, and for the most appealing jobs, it is actually 3 to 5 days. So if you miss an opening at a great location by a week, it's already gone by the time you look at it. Another thing with time is that you can't really always pick and choose how much time and when you can do it at a facility. So, for example, if you, let's say, you want to do the first week of March at a certain facility, but the facility doesn't need you in that week. So there's no reconciling that fact. If they want someone in the second week of March and you are free in the first week of March, they're going to hire someone who's available in the second week of March and not you. So there's less autonomy in terms of time. And another thing is that facilities want you there between 1 to 4 weeks a month. The third unique thing that I learned about locums is that when you sign an independent contractor agreement with a locum agency, they do an internal credentialing, which is very similar to what a hospital would do. They vet your education history, your work history, they reach out to your references. And once their credentialing team is satisfied, and once you are internally credentialed, then they, when you apply to a job through that agency, the external credentialing for the hospital, that goes by generally quite fast. So that is, it is a little cumbersome, but eventually in the long run it helps you if you don't have to do the credentialing process every single step of the credentialing process. And personally, I'm a victim of that because last year I did a lot of locums and I got credentialed. I don't know how many times, I've lost count, and it was probably one of the most frustrating experiences of my life. So talking about like pros and cons. In general, if you compare working as a locums pathologist versus being employed full-time, you make more money as gross pay. Your travel and accommodation is covered, so you save money on those as well. If you do locums at different hospitals, you gain experience of working in different systems, which can be valuable for you. Once you have done a few locums and you have a preferred agency, you can basically make your own schedule up to a certain point. For early career and even later pathologists, locums can serve as audition as well. So if a facility is looking for a full-time person, but in the meanwhile they are hiring a locum, if you make a good impression, then it is a quite high of a chance that they're probably going to interview and hire you compared to someone who they've never worked with. So, and some other sort of like pros, and it depends on, it's my personal opinion, is that you don't have to do tumor boards, you don't have to do any administration task, and at some places you don't have to do any call either. A majority of places you'll only be doing anatomic pathology, except maybe a rare call from the CP lab about what to do with a particular specimen. But that's like the extent of the call, if you have to do call as well. On the flip side, while you're making more money, your taxes are not going to be straightforward, especially if you're doing locums in different states throughout the year. But there are tax consultants out there to help you with this. I think the biggest issues I faced and have heard from other people as well is being away from your family and your home for extended periods of time. For one of my assignments, I was actually away from home for 3 months straight. But it was mentally and emotionally very challenging. In terms of locations, I have found that most of the locations that you see, most of the hospitals that are who are hiring for locums are not in metro areas. They are relatively farther from bigger cities. So that if you're not interested in living in a very small town or working at a relatively smaller hospital, then locums may or may not be for you. Another thing I think, which I personally find it quite annoying, and I've called it magnet, is that once you enter this arena, once you start looking for locums seriously and you like submit your information, you put your email and your phone number on websites to sort of like let locum agents contact you, then you are bombarded with messages and emails every day. Almost every single day I get emails and messages, and some of them go to my spam, some go to my main, and then also texts and calls and voicemails, just basically asking people asking me, oh, can you do this locum or can you do that locum? And that happens more often when actually I am at a locum job, so I can't be at two places at once, so it is quite annoying. So there's no database that tells people that you are actually working at a particular hospital. So one thing that happened to me was I was working at a hospital, and I started getting calls from locum agencies asking me to work at that same hospital because my contract was expiring. So it was very funny for them to hear that I was actually at the position that they were hiring for. So that happens. If you're a private person, you don't want people to just randomly call you or message you or email you every day, then locums may not be for you. So who are locums for? This is an intriguing question, in my mind at least, without any good answer. I've asked many recruiters this question, and the answer is always, it depends. Different people do locums during different stages of their career. There's no set rule that an early career or a late career person has to be the one doing locums. During my medical training in the US, I found 2 cheat codes for licensing that I want to share with you. The first is FCVS, which is a service by the Federation of State Medical Boards. Anyone who has done step 3 know the FSMB. So they're the same people. You can get your identity verified and get all your documents, which include a medical school diploma, your USMLE step scores, your board certification. You can have all of them verified and be in one place, so that when you apply for a state's license, you don't have to reinvent the wheel and send those same documents to a board every single time. The initial cost is about $400, and for every new board that you send your documents to, they charge about $200. IMLCC stands for Interstate Medical Licensing Compact, and it is an even better thing than FCVS. There are currently 33 states and Washington, D.C. that are taking part in IMLCC. If you are living in one of those states or have worked in them in the last 2 years, you are eligible for IMLC. Your state, the state where you worked or lived, will be called an SPL, or State of Principal Licensing. If you apply for an IMLC, you'll have to get fingerprinted through your state board. And once it is done and you pay the IMLC fee, which is about $700, you can apply for a license in any of the other 32 states which are in the compact. So that is sort of like a reciprocal licensing. And you will get a full license within 2 weeks. I've never had to wait more than 2 weeks when I've applied to IMLC. And I think IMLC is a must if you're planning to do locums. Otherwise, I mean, unless you're planning to move to a different state and you're not applying for multiple state licenses at the same time, it doesn't make a lot of sense. But for locums, it is ideal. There are some states like New York, California, Massachusetts, Oregon that do not accept IMLC yet. So when you apply for those boards, you actually have to go through the FCVS route versus the IMLC route. Now, let me show you some examples of locum opportunities that like I mentioned earlier, that are received almost on a daily basis. So this is a good job ad because it is detailed and tells you almost everything that you need to know about a locums job. This is a job in a state of Iowa, which, by the way, is part of IMLC, and it asks for someone to be board certified, licensed of Iowa or IMLC, and then it tells if it's hospital-based, what is the call ratio, and how many people are there, how many pathologists, how many pathology assistants, and what are the certain specialties, subspecialties that they see. Sometimes they even tell you how many, like on average, how many slides, how many cases they see as well, which I don't think I see here, but that is also good information to have. They also tell you which EMR is there. So basically, a lot of the questions that you ask even during a permanent job interview, you have to ask during the locums as well. Some of them are answered here, some of them are not. This is another job ad, not as detailed, but it gives some relevant information. This was for a job in Arizona, which is also an IMLC state. I have had mostly good experiences in the locum field, but like anywhere else, there were a few bad experiences as well. Based on the things that happened, one locum consultant refuses to take my calls now, and there is one locum consultant that I have had to block. At another place, the facility canceled my contract without understanding the extenuating circumstances, and I had to be without a locum job for a while because of their actions. I've heard that at some places, since locums are temporary, all the grunt work is redirected their way, and locum pathologists can get burned out very fast. Lastly, it is good to have locum agents who are sharks because they can get you desired jobs relatively easier than others, but it is not a necessity in the locums world. Hopefully this video was useful for you regarding pathology locums. Please comment if you have had any questions regarding this, and I will do the best to reply. Thank you.